Alright, thank you for joining me, guys. Now this project today is going to be a nice quick one. We're just making this simple bus stop as you would have seen at the start of the video. Now to do this, we're just going to use some cereal box cardboard and some matchsticks here. Now this is the back wall I'm crafting here first. No specific measurements, I've just sort of eyeballed this to what would be right for the scale. And to glue on these little posts for the back, I've just used a couple of spots of super glue. Now those back posts are a few millimeters shorter, as you would have seen me cut a little bit off each end. That's just so that I can get an angled roof on this one towards the end of the project. So for the base and for the sides of the bus stop, we're going to be using this clear packaging plastic here. Now this gives us a nice rigid base for the project, which I wanted. Something nice and thin that wouldn't warp when I applied glue and different things to it. And something I could also see through, so you could sort of see the battle mat or where it was placed. So with this, as you can see, it is quite shiny, but we will fix that towards the end of the video and we'll give it that a nice matte finish. Now with this clear plastic, it is a little bit tricky to get the super glue to bond. So what I'm doing is just a little bit of sandpaper there to scuff up a couple of spots where these posts will join onto the plastic. That'll just give the glue a little bit more grab and make sure it doesn't break away too easily in the future. So a couple of spots of glue there will hold that in place. You can reinforce it again with some extra glue once it's dried, but that should be fine. With the windows here, I wanted to give these a shattered glass look, so just going in with my craft knife here, I just wanted to add some cracks. Now I've gone out from a central point and just lightly scored this with the craft knife, and it has come up really well. So this worked perfectly. I think we'll be able to use this technique in future builds and get that sort of broken, shattered glass look quite easily. Now to attach these sides onto the bus stop, what I'm doing is grabbing the full-length matchstick here, which will make the front pole, and I'm just scoring down the center of that so that we're able to place in this window just into that matchstick itself. So you don't need to score it all the way through, just put a nice little groove in there and that should hold that plastic in place for the time being. Now once you're sure that it is straight and it is at the right height that you want it, you can go then and add a couple of drops of super glue there just to hold it in place and make sure it doesn't come apart. Just set that aside to dry and we'll start working on the second window. Now this one I wanted to be a poster window, so I just found this old pamphlet for Space Marine. It had a couple of small pictures in there which looked like they'd be roughly the right size for my poster window, and I've just cut this out. It's oversized for what I'm going to need, but I will trim this down once that glass panel has been glued and dried. So with this, I'm just using some PVA glue spread around on the Space Marine poster and then pushing down my clear plastic window. As I mentioned, it's oversized, so I'll trim that down shortly. Now with the seat, I've just used a couple of little strips of balsa wood here, just giving the larger edge at the back. That'll give us a little bit more surface area to glue this to the back wall. Putting a couple of little grooves in the top of the seat here. It's really hard to sort of see these in the final build, but it only took a few seconds, so I figured it was worth doing. Once you've got that done, a little bit of super glue on the back edge, and then you can press this into place at the right height. Now with this second window, the poster window, I have gone in and scored this one to give it that shattered glass look as well. It's really quite hard to tell on this one that it's there once the build's finished, but for the time it takes, it was still worth the effort of putting that in there. So now we're going to place these side panels on. Simple, just putting in a little bit of super glue and putting them in place, and obviously a little bit of super glue for the bottom of those posts where the base is as well. You can, gluing this to the base rather than making the bus stop and then gluing it to the base was just a lot easier to get it all to come together. Keeps the angles nice and even and you know, holds it in place while you're building. It did make a little bit more trouble when it came to painting it at the end, but nothing too dramatic, and I think it was a lot easier to do it that way than it would have been to try and build this without the base under it. So here's the roof that I'm building now. This is just simply, again, some simple cereal box cardboard. I am cutting some strips here to get a bit of a corrugated roof effect. It's the same effect I used in the dumpsters. There's no science behind this or specific measurements. I've just cut some strips of cereal box cardboard 3 or 4 mil wide, and I'm just going to glue these down to the roof and just leave a gap of about 1 or 2 millimeters. Now we'll put a link to that dumpster video so you can see this process in a little bit more detail. but shortly you'll see how this all comes together when I start applying that masking tape to the top and pressing it in. It'll give us a nice smooth corrugated look for this roof. I didn't want to use corrugated paper because for this one it would have looked a little bit unrealistic and a bit too much like a shed roof or something, so I felt this was the best way to go for this one. So with this craft tape, I'm just going to glue this or cut this to size so that I can tape it to the top and then press those corrugations in. So I've just cut a couple of corners off there just to make folding the edges over a little bit easier, because I do want to seal all those edges. I don't want to have anything sort of peeling up or coming away anytime in the future. So to get those corrugations through over the tape, we just press them down. I just used my fingernail, and I've just used a piece of tape here on the underside of the roof just to cover all those folds that we pushed around from the top. Just gave it a nice clean look. Now for the edging of this roof, I want a bit of guttering or something to add a little bit more depth to this roof, so I'm just using some 1mm balsa here. You could obviously use cereal box cardboard here. If you don't have the balsa, it will still work fine. I've just cut those strips around about 3mm or so. They'll just sit around the edge of this roof and give it that kind of guttering, just a little bit of extra depth for that, and just, you know, one more detail that doesn't take too much effort at all. Now to stand those little pieces up on their ends and glue them on can be a little bit tricky. The easiest way I found to do it was to put a few small drops of super glue onto the balsa, stand it up against the roof edge while it's on your tabletop, and then just get a small strip of balsa or a straight edge of some kind and just hold it in place for the few seconds while that super glue dries. So as you can see, that's come up pretty well. The dimensions for this are looking really good, so I think we're ready to finally put this roof on and get it all put together so we can start painting and adding in those other details. I found it easiest to put the roof on upside down just because the main structure of this bus stop did sit on there quite well. When I tried to put the roof on with that packing tape that I'd used, it just wanted to slide off the bus stop. So doing it upside down was the easiest way to go. And you'll find here that same as we did before, just a few spots of glue on each join, let it dry and then go back in and reinforce it with some extra super glue. Now I printed out some small signs off the internet, scaled them to the right scale, or what I thought would be the right scale. I just want to put a little no smoking sign on the back wall of this bus stop. Again, it's probably not an easy to pick up detail on the build, but you know, that's the sort of thing I live for. I don't mind spending the time to do those little things. It's really what makes a build come together. Here I'm just adding a little sign to the front post of the bus stop. I guess this would be our bus schedule or something. It's just a small scrap of balsa that I'm going to glue onto the front post, and I'll paint that a slightly different color shortly as well. Now I've glued down some little pieces of paper, so again just some little rectangles of paper that I've scribbled on with a pencil just to make them look a little bit like newspaper clippings or posters or something that have fallen on the ground there. I'm also adding some grass tufts and some gravel around the base of this thing, so I wanted it to look a little bit you know, abandoned and unused, which is why I added in the paper and some of these rocks and the grass tufts. So it's important to get a little bit of variation with this sort of thing. So, you know, different size grass tufts, you know, different little pieces of gravel, different pieces of paper scattered around, and you'll see here that it will come together quite nicely and it looks pretty good at the end. One thing I did do with the painting here, I just brush painted everything. I just picked a few basic colors and just put them in place, and you know, I will weather this up to get it a little bit more dirty looking. Obviously you don't need to do that, but to get that weathering I just simply used some brown paint, thin down brown paint, as you would have seen me do in some previous videos as well. So to get rid of the shine on that base, we're just going to use a little bit of matte Mod Podge, thinned with a very little bit of water here. And I'm just going to cover the entire base, being careful not to put it over all those grass tufts that we laid down. And to get this nice and smooth, all I've done is clean my brush off once I've got the Mod Podge in place. And just using that clean brush, I've just gone over before it all dries and just smoothed it out and taken off the excess Mod Podge. Once that dries, you won't see those brush strokes very well at all. It will give a matte finish and you will be able to see the color underneath that base. So that'll show through your battle mat or tabletop or whatever you want. So a nice quick build today. This one was a lot of fun to do. Like I said, didn't take very long at all, but it'll look great with the other terrain we've made and on that battle mat I made a few months ago. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much to my Patreon supporters. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.